Weavel was a space pirate general and part of a special forces unit. After a duel with Samus Aran herself that should have killed him, the pirates managed to salvage his still-functioning brain and spinal cord and house them into a mobile life support power suit, making him reminiscent of the Protoss Dragoons of StarCraft and the Imperium Dreadnaughts of Warhammer 40,000. Reborn, Weavel is now a bounty hunter whose association with the space pirates will continue, quote, as long as it's convenient, unquote. It is this last quote from the March 2006 Nintendo Power issue that I want to draw attention to. Weavel, among various other bounty hunters, made his debut in Metroid Prime Hunters in search of the so-called ultimate power in the Alimbic Cluster. Whether he sought to capture the power for the glory of the space pirates or for himself for revenge against Samus is unclear. What is clear is that he, along with all the other bounty hunters, were deceived, and that there was no such ultimate power at all, as the whole ordeal had been a ruse crafted by the demon Gorea as a ploy for its own escape. So in truth, Weavel's failure to capture the power was from no fault of his own. That being said, would the Pirate Command still tolerate such a failure? Would they in fact even believe him? Well, despite his usefulness and doubtless loyalty to the space pirates, I think we do have enough evidence to conclude that Weavel did, indeed, fall out of the good graces of the space pirates. This is because of the mysterious deceased soldier found in the depths of the Brinstar Caverns of Zebes in Super Metroid. While it is still as of yet unidentified, the armor design is uncannily and undeniably similar to Weavel's own. And by pointing this out, I am of course making the claim that this unidentified corpse was, in fact, Weavel himself. Before delving any further into this hypothesis, let us draw a few inferred conclusions about this unidentified soldier's death. For one, the corpse itself appears to be a fairly recent kill as of Samus's encounter with it, as it is still undergoing decomposition by the local spugs. For another, it seems implied that he met his end at the onslaught of the Gorea guard door within a few yards in front of it. What this door is guarding in particular is Kraid's lair, and therefore also the vault containing the Varia suit upgrade. Lastly, an important detail is that it was already dead at the moment of Samus finding it, which obviously, yet crucially means that something or someone else killed it. Next, before settling on the corpse being Weavel's own, let us first eliminate other possibilities. Firstly, if it isn't Weavel, could it have been a Chozo, as the armor is fairly similar to Samus's own, thereby connecting the corpse to the wrecked ship? Although a fascinating proposition, I find this idea very unlikely, as for one, the carrion feeding of the corpse again indicates a recent death, and the Chozo have long since been gone from Zebes. Even with the notion that there remained one Chozo warrior left on the planet from among those who perished or fled, the corpse is too short to be a Chozo, or at least a fully grown one. It does appear to be taller than Samus were it to be standing up, but still not the height of an adult Chozo nonetheless. In that regard, could it have been a Galactic Federation Marine from the Prime era, an elite soldier as seen in Samus Returns, a soldier of the Federation Army from Other M, or even a biologic researcher as seen in Metroid Fusion? I find these examples also very unlikely, as the corpse's armor, although similar in some cases, doesn't match any of these. Further, given that it is the only such corpse found on Zebes in the game, I find it hard to believe that a single Federation soldier was roaming about the depths of Zebes before meeting his end in Brinstar, since the Federation only deploy solo combatants when they are as equipped and capable as Samus herself. Perhaps in that regard, one such soldier was left behind upon the departure of the Federation's reinforcements to Zebes during the space pirate invasion, or perhaps during another time of surveying the base's remains somewhere between the events of Zero Mission and Super Metroid. However, even this doesn't seem plausible, as the Federation personnel and such, although skilled in their own right, are frankly, by and large, not nearly equipped or even arguably capable enough combatants to survive that long on Zebes. Zebes, with or without the space pirate presence. Maybe this last point isn't entirely fair, as there have been notable exceptions, such as Anthony Higgs or even James Pierce, but I think I have made my point why the corpse being affiliated with the Federation isn't very likely. In that case, could the corpse have belonged to an Eggonoid Star Marine, from whom the space pirates have quote-unquote acquired equipment from in the past? Well, that can't really be proven one way or another, since other than what I just mentioned, there's nothing known about the ESM other than that they manufacture, quote, military-grade plasma artillery cannons, unquote. So let's just move on, shall we? Among the known possibilities, therefore, the only one left, as aforementioned, is the bounty hunter Weavel himself. Although Weavel's suit isn't a perfect match, the rounded shoulder, for instance, is on the right side instead of the left, it is certainly the most similar, particularly Weavel's in-game silvery gray suit variant, that detracts from his more refined green hue model. The yellow liquid that is seen dripping from the helm of the soldier, therefore, is not actually blood per se, but rather likely the preserving artificial cerebrospinal fluid and whatnot from within the suit's life support system, as only his nervous system from his original body remained. This may be the reason that Weavel's visor is yellow in the first place. As an interesting side note, the symbol for the battle hammer, Weavel's weapon, not only rather resembles the launched projectiles themselves, but also seems to resemble an eye, such as the eye of Mother Brain, or even the eye of the Gorea that killed him. If then the deceased soldier is indeed Weavel himself, then why would the space pirates kill him? Well, considering that even pirate engineers who had created the arrow mines were executed for a design flaw that disallowed the simultaneous usage of shielding and weapons, it is clear that failure of any sort is taken very seriously by the space pirates. And so for Weavel to fail to obtain the fabled ultimate power in the Alimbic Cluster, as mentioned earlier, despite it never even existing, would surely be considered an offense worthy of death by the space pirates. And so Weavel fled from his confederates and went into hiding, but was then eventually discovered and killed. This then raises the question, why would Weavel return to Zebes if he were fleeing the space pirates? Well, for one, at the time of Metroid Prime, the direct prequel to Metroid Prime Hunters, what was left of the space pirates and their base on Zebes, if anything at all, was considerably minimal, enough for the then orbiting space pirate frigates Orpheon, Cyriacus, and Volparagom to abandon the planet altogether in search of refuge elsewhere, Orpheon to Talon 4, and possibly even Cyriacus or Volparagom to Ether, perhaps even both, as at least 2 pirate vessels are known to have traveled to Ether, one of which was identified as a frigate. So the threat of space pirate retribution in the system, at least at the time, would have been insignificant, especially with the recent further destruction of their operations on Zebes' neighboring planet, Talon 4. Perhaps then, in Weavel's mind, it was far more likely for the space pirates to relocate their headquarters rather than return to their former HQ before the dust had even settled, so to speak, which is exactly what happened, as apparently the pirates hadn't returned to Zebes until a few stellar years later. For another, Weavel hailed from the Zebesian pirates and was first encountered in Brinstar, according to his dev creator Richard Barodi, and it is in Brinstar, of course, that the deceased soldier is found. Naturally, therefore, Weavel returned home, as it were, as he would have been more familiar with the planet than some other planet yet untouched by his kind. As luck would have it, however, the space pirates hadn't given up entirely on Zebes and eventually did return. The pirates then found his ship before he could escape with it and either confiscated it or destroyed it, assuming, of course, Weavel hadn't already disposed of it to remove any traces of his presence on the planet. So Weavel fled further from his former compatriots, delving deeper into the labyrinthine caverns of Zebes. But he couldn't hide forever, and he knew that. So perhaps in a desperate attempt to escape, Weavel crept about throughout the newly constructed pirate base, taking out as many space pirates as he could, perhaps even attempting to augment his own suit with the surviving Chozo equipment scattered throughout the planet along the way, so that he would stand a better chance against the pirate forces. Given that Weavel's suit design appears to be based on Samus's own, even with human-like limbs and fingers to boot, and given the space pirates have sought to imitate Samus's suit and weapons tech in the past as demonstrated by the beam troopers in Metroid Prime, it may very well be that Weavel's suit was compatible with Chozo technology, so seeking to upgrade his suit further by obtaining what few Chozo artifacts on the planet remained is not entirely implausible. This would help explain why the deceased soldier is encountered outside of Kraid's room, as Kraid himself is guarding the Varia suit upgrade. Furthermore, hunting for and augmenting his own suit with such upgrades would certainly help explain the time gap between Hunters and Super Metroid, but even without that hypothesis, Weavel had already demonstrated his fighting prowess, as he had not only previously been a space pirate general and part of the Special Forces, but he had also demonstrated considerable resilience and weapons proficiency against Samus herself throughout the Alimbic Cluster, so the idea of him lasting for a considerable time on Zebes is not unreasonable. Unfortunately, it was only a matter of time before the pirates would get the upper hand against the disgraced Weavel, and so he eventually found himself surrounded in the depths of Brinstar, wounded from onslaught after onslaught by those who were once his brethren. Finally, he managed to learn the location of the Varia suit, and thus made one last attempt to preserve himself by obtaining the artifact. But sadly, he was already too far gone to stand a chance against the Gorea before him, let alone Kraid, and so Weavel met his ultimate end in the depths of Brinstar, not at the hands of the hunter who nearly killed him before, but ironically, by those who had rebuilt him instead. In fact, it may be that at least part of the reason why the space pirates had not yet emerged at the time of Samus making planetfall in Super Metroid until their security systems detected her was that they were already occupied with another bounty hunter in the first place.